The View studio was already humming with the kind of electricity that signaled trouble, not chaos, not noise, just a dense, hanging tension like the moments before a summer storm. The crew moved efficiently but cautiously, as if they were stepping around something delicate that might shatter at any moment. The cameras hadn't rolled yet, but everyone in the room could feel it. Something might go wrong, and nobody could predict how or when, or who would be the one to pull the trigger. Denzel Washington was scheduled to appear on the show that morning. The promotion was for his latest film, a thoughtful drama about redemption, healing, and community restoration in urban America. Before we dive in, subscribe please. On the surface, it was supposed to be a conversation about the art of storytelling, the responsibility of representation, and the impact of cinema on real lives. His publicist had been meticulous. No politics, no surprise questions, no digressions into controversy. Just focus on the film and his decades of work uplifting marginalized communities through mentorship, philanthropy, and representation. The producers of The View had nodded, smiled, agreed on paper, but whispers circulated minutes before showtime. One of the producers leaned in close to Sonny Hostin backstage and said something barely audible, something about pushing Denzel on his political silence, about calling attention to his perceived privilege. Just enough to ignite something. When Sonny emerged, her demeanor had changed, her walk sharper, her eyes cooler, her questions already formed. Backstage, the mood was a mixture of reverence and suspicion. Denzel himself stood in quiet focus, his suit immaculate, his face unreadable. He had been in thousands of interviews, but he could read a room better than most, and this room didn't feel right. The set looked the same as always, but under the lights, something had shifted. It felt less like a talk show and more like an interrogation room. Even the lighting, brighter, harsher, seemed positioned to capture every blink, every breath, every twitch of discomfort. Then he walked out. The applause erupted. Loud, respectful, tinged with awe. This wasn't just another celebrity. This was Denzel Washington. 2 Oscars, dozens of iconic roles, 4 decades of unblemished excellence. He smiled warmly, his humility as consistent as his talent. But behind his eyes, there was something else. Not fear, not anger, just readiness. The kind of readiness a man develops after spending his life navigating expectations that rarely match his reality. Whoopi Goldberg, ever the veteran, opened the segment with her usual grace. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice calm but rich with respect, "the legendary Denzel Washington." "Thank you, Whoopi," Denzel said, settling into his chair with poise. "Always good to be here with you all. I appreciate the invitation." Joy Behar dove in, her energy sincere. "Denzel, your new film deals with some heavy themes: redemption, forgiveness, community. What pulled you into this story?" Denzel's face lit up. Finally, familiar ground. "You know, Joy, I've always been drawn to stories about transformation, not just the big Hollywood kind, but the real kind. People trying to do better, trying to heal. This film's about that. It's about people choosing to come back from darkness, to give something back, to grow." The conversation moved easily from there. Sarah Haynes leaned in, asking about the film's authentic portrayal of urban communities. "It was essential," Denzel said. "We didn't want to guess. We didn't want to generalize. We spoke to former gang members, single mothers, youth workers, people who live this reality every day. You can't fake authenticity, and too many films do." His voice was steady but passionate. "It's about listening. Listening before you write, listening before you film, and sometimes listening before you speak." For 15 solid minutes, it was the kind of interview that makes producers proud. Denzel talked about spending time in youth programs, sitting down with at-risk kids, helping shape not just stories but real lives. He spoke of his foundation, of scholarships, of long nights mentoring young black actors who were trying to find their place in an industry that still often closes its doors. "I met a kid once," he said, his voice dipping into memory, "fresh out of prison, lost, angry. He told me he saw me in a film once, and for the first time, he thought maybe I could be more. He didn't have anyone in his life telling him that before. That's why this work matters." The audience was silent, listening, hanging on to every word. It was a masterclass in presence, earnest, vulnerable, wise. And then the air shifted. Sonny Hostin, until then quiet, spoke up. Her voice was calm but laced with precision. "Denzel," she said, "you've built a legendary career, and with that, you've gained immense influence. But you've also been relatively quiet on many political issues that deeply affect the communities you represent. Don't you feel a responsibility to use your platform more publicly?" Denzel didn't flinch, but the shift in posture was there, a straightening of the back, a slight narrowing of the eyes. "I believe in using my platform thoughtfully," he replied. "I do a lot of work, Sonny, quietly, behind the scenes. I fund programs, I mentor kids, I support education. Not everything has to be broadcast to count." Sonny's eyes didn't move. "But when black lives are being lost to police violence, when rights are being stripped away, when racism is killing people, isn't silence complicity?" The studio temperature dropped. You could feel it. The rest of the panel sensed it too. This wasn't going to be a typical segment anymore. Denzel's tone remained steady, but the smile was gone. "I don't think I've been silent. I've spoken when I felt it mattered. But I also believe real work doesn't need a camera. There's a difference between activism and performance." Sonny leaned in further. "But Denzel, your voice could move mountains. When someone with your platform stays quiet, it sends a message. Especially to young black people, that maybe these fights aren't worth having." Denzel inhaled deeply. He'd heard this argument before. From critics, from press, from people who thought that because he didn't march on Instagram, he wasn't in the fight. His jaw tensed. "Sonny," he said carefully, "you're making assumptions. You're assuming that if it's not visible, it doesn't exist. That's not just inaccurate, it's dangerous." People in the crowd shifted. An uneasiness crept in. This was not the conversation they expected to witness. The warmth of the opening had been replaced with something colder, tense, brittle, uncertain. Alyssa Farah Griffin stepped in, trying to smooth it over. "Maybe you could tell us about some of the work you're doing behind the scenes, Denzel." But Sonny wasn't letting go. Not yet. "I appreciate charitable work," she said, her voice tightening. "But when the house is on fire, you don't quietly donate to the fire department. You sound the alarm. Your privilege comes with responsibility." That word landed like a shot. Denzel's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward slightly, no longer just fielding questions, but preparing for something else. "My privilege?" he repeated, low, deliberate. And then something in him changed. "My privilege?" Denzel repeated, quieter this time, but sharper. The studio was so silent, it was as if even the cameras were holding their breath. He sat up straighter, the change in his demeanor subtle but unmistakable. There was no anger in his voice, at least not the explosive kind people expect in confrontations. This wasn't about rage. It was about resolve, steel, clarity, 40 years of composure, coming to a boil under the glare of stage lights. "Sonny," he began slowly, each word deliberate, his voice steady and low, "let me tell you about privilege." The panel froze. The studio audience was silent. "Privilege is sitting at this table every day," he continued, lecturing people about what they should be doing while collecting a paycheck for having opinions. The room went absolutely still. Sonny blinked. For the first time, she looked unsure of how to respond. Denzel leaned back slightly in his chair, his voice still calm, but his presence expanding like a pressure wave. "You think because I'm not loud, I'm not working, that because I don't hashtag, I don't care, that because I don't hold press conferences, I'm not in the fight." He looked directly at Sonny, not with hostility, but with something harder to define: truth, history, experience that didn't need permission or validation. "I've been working in inner-city communities since before some people on this panel knew what activism meant. I've mentored hundreds of young people, actors, writers, kids with no fathers, no guidance. I've paid tuition, funded programs, buried kids who didn't make it. But I didn't do it for likes." Sonny sat still, her expression neutral, but her eyes searching, perhaps hoping to find a crack in his armor, a way to bring the conversation back into her control. Denzel wasn't offering that. "You talk about responsibility," he said. "I take responsibility for the impact I've had every day. I don't need cameras to validate it." There was a weight behind his words that couldn't be faked. The kind of weight you earn by being there, year after year, not just talking about problems, but helping solve them quietly, consistently, without applause. Sonny opened her mouth to speak, her voice careful now, legal, polished. "Denzel, I'm not attacking your character." "Yes, you are." Denzel shot back, not with anger, but with finality. "You're attacking my character because my activism doesn't look like yours." His voice rose, not in volume, but in intensity. It carried authority, the kind forged through endurance, not entitlement. "You think there's only one way to show commitment to your community, and it just happens to be the way you chose. Convenient, isn't it? Now, the studio felt like a courtroom, the lights like spotlights on a stage where something irreversible had begun to unfold. Sonny tried to maintain composure, but Denzel's presence was swallowing the room. "You're questioning my commitment to my people," he continued, gesturing broadly, "because I don't perform it for the media. Because I don't express it in the way that fits your script." The audience remained still. No laughter, no gasps, just silence. The kind that means the moment is bigger than television. Then, for the first time, Denzel stood. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't dramatic for its own sake. It was controlled, purposeful. A man standing not to leave, but to tower. All 6'1" of him commanded the room, his charcoal suit uncreased, his shoulders squared, his eyes locked in. This was the Denzel Washington who'd walked into courtrooms in Philadelphia, who stared down corruption in Training Day, who delivered justice in Fences. But this wasn't a character. This was him. "You want to talk about privilege?" he said, now standing behind his chair, both hands on the backrest. "I earned every inch of mine, through discipline, through persistence, through refusing to let anyone tell me what kind of black man I had to be." The entire panel sat still, no interruptions, no polite segues. Just witness. "You sit here every day," he said, pointing not accusing, but indicating dividing people, framing disagreement as betrayal. "You don't challenge ideas, you attack motives. That's not activism, that's performance." Sonny's posture shifted slightly, her hands clasped tighter in her lap. Her usual confidence wavered beneath the heat of that spotlight. Whoopi, sensing the train veering off the rails, tried gently to intervene. "Denzel, maybe we should take a breath." "No," he replied sharply, but respectfully. "No breaths, no timeouts. She wants to question my commitment to my community? Let's have that conversation." He turned back to Sonny, his expression no longer defensive now. It was confrontational, yes, but earned. Measured. "What have you built?" he asked. "What opportunities have you created? What barriers have you broken for anyone except yourself?" The studio was still locked in absolute silence. Even the crew had stopped moving. "I've created schools, funded programs, put people to work. I've sat with murderers trying to become fathers again. I've held mothers crying over sons they lost to gang violence. And I did it without press, without cameras, without needing applause." Sonny opened her mouth again, trying to take back the reins. "I've used my platform to raise awareness," she began. "Aware," Denzel cut in, and then paused. A hollow laugh escaped his throat. "Awareness?" he repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. "Awareness without action is just noise." He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. No longer standing on the stage, but owning it. "You raise awareness about problems," he said, "while I've been solving them." That line struck the room like thunder, not theatrical, true, heavy with proof. You want to know what activism looks like? It's the kid from South Central who just got into NYU on a scholarship I paid for. It's the mother in Harlem who started her own catering business because my foundation helped her with the startup costs. It's the former gang member who's now directing short films in Compton because I gave him a shot when nobody else would. His words were living proof, not opinion, not debate. They were results. "See, you want me to play a part," he continued. "You want me to be the angry black man, the outraged symbol of injustice, because that fits your script, that makes your activism feel real." Sonny tried again, quieter now. "I'm not asking you to be angry." "Yes, you are," Denzel said, louder now, his voice cutting through the space like a blade. "You're asking me to perform rage for this audience. You want me to validate your narrative by becoming the stereotype you think I should be." He walked back to his chair and grabbed his jacket from the back. The motion was smooth but firm. There was no theatrics in it, just finality, a decision made. "I'm done with this conversation," he said, slipping on his jacket. "I'm done with this show. I'm done with people thinking they can lecture me about what I owe my community." He paused at the edge of the stage, turned, and looked directly at Sonny one last time. "You know what's really hurting the black community?" he asked, his voice lower now, but even more intense. "It's not police. It's not voting laws. It's people like you telling young black men that they're victims, that they can't win unless the system changes first. That success isn't possible unless someone hands it to them." And with that, he walked off stage. His footsteps echoed like punctuation. The studio remained frozen for several long seconds after Denzel Washington exited the stage. It wasn't the silence of confusion, it was the silence of impact, of something tectonic that had just shifted under everyone's feet. Sonny Hostin sat stiffly in her chair, blinking. She was rarely at a loss for words, but this time, she was. Her notes were still in front of her, untouched. Her posture, usually confident, was now tense, held together by sheer habit. Alyssa Farah Griffin looked stunned, darting a glance between the other co-hosts as if to silently ask, "What do we do now?" Joy Behar pursed her lips and looked down, clearly uncomfortable. Sarah Haynes reached for her coffee mug, though it was clear she didn't want a sip. She just needed something to hold on to. Whoopi Goldberg, the elder stateswoman of the panel, took a long breath and looked directly into the camera. Her voice, calm but shaken, broke the silence. "Well," she said, "that was passionate. We'll be right back." The cut to commercial was abrupt, no music. Just a sharp transition that mirrored the mood in the room, unresolved, stunned, raw. But outside the studio, the story had already exploded. Clips of Denzel's monologue flooded the internet within minutes. One clip in particular, him saying, "You want me to perform rage so you can feel better about your activism," hit like lightning. It was reposted by celebrities, activists, educators, even people who didn't usually comment on entertainment news. In a culture that had grown numb to outrage, this moment felt different. Not because of volume, but because of clarity. On Instagram, Denzel posted a simple black and white photo of a young boy in a hoodie holding a script. The caption read, "Real change happens through action, not lectures. Real progress is built, not tweeted. Real leadership is quiet work that doesn't need to be seen. Keep building." It was the only thing he posted for days. Back on The View, the following day was tense. Sunny opened the show with a prepared statement. She didn't apologize, but she acknowledged, "Yesterday's conversation took an unexpected and emotional turn. I believe in holding people accountable. I also believe in different paths to service. I respect Denzel's work and his perspective." It was carefully worded, clearly lawyered. But the internet had already moved past it. The narrative had taken root. Commentators from across the spectrum weighed in. Some praised Sunny for asking the drums hard questions. Others called her out for attempting to shame a man with decades of actual impact. Memes exploded, Denzel walking off, Denzel standing behind the chair, Denzel saying, "Awareness without action is just noise." A new generation was discovering his off-screen legacy for the first time. But more importantly, young people were listening. They began sharing stories, one after another. A high school teacher from Atlanta wrote, "One of my students, a 6-year-old black boy who barely talks in class, came up to me today and said, 'Denzel said I don't have to be angry to be strong.' That's all he said. But it meant something." An aspiring filmmaker from Chicago posted a selfie with a film camera and wrote, "My first short film is funded by a grant from Denzel's foundation. Didn't know he didn't even announce it. Just found the money and the help. That's real leadership." A single mother in DC tweeted, "3 years ago, I got a scholarship from his nonprofit to go back to school. I'm now a nurse. He never asked for attention, just gave me a chance." And the stories kept coming, not of outrage, not of sound bites, but of opportunities quietly created, of lives changed by someone who believed that change didn't need applause to be valid. A few days later, at a film festival Q&A in Toronto, Denzel was asked directly about the incident. He paused for a moment, then answered calmly, "I don't regret standing up for how I do things. There are many ways to serve your community. Not everyone has to march. Some build, some fund. Some mentor, some listen, and you don't have to perform your pain to prove your commitment. I've always believed in lifting people up. That's my activism." He didn't say more, he didn't need to. The audience rose to its feet, not because of theatrics, but because the truth had landed. The real revolution wasn't in the confrontation itself. It was in exposing the divide, the gap between performance and purpose, between volume and value. Denzel didn't scream, he didn't insult, he didn't storm out in anger. He stood in truth, spoke with earned gravity, and reminded everyone what leadership really looks like. In a culture that sometimes confuses hashtags for heroism and visibility for virtue, he walked away from all of it, not out of pride, but out of principle. Because what he left behind wasn't just a viral moment, it was a message. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be angry to be powerful. You don't have to perform for a cause to be part of the solution. And most of all, you don't owe anyone your pain to prove your worth. As the days passed, the noise faded, the headlines shifted. But that moment, those words lingered. Somewhere, a young person who'd been told the system was unbeatable looked at Denzel and thought, maybe there's another way. And that, in the end, was the real mic drop. If you like this video, then subscribe.